Well, hi there. Welcome to Chess-Based Workshop for another week. I'm Steve Lopez. I'm your host. Thanks for clicking on the link and joining us. We may have some exciting sound effects today as part of the workshop. Apparently there's a house up the street that's on fire, and we've had fire trucks screaming by for a while. So we may get some exciting sirens going by the place. So if you hear a siren, don't panic. That's me, not you. That'll be coming out of your computer, not out of the street there in front of your house. What we looked at last week in Chess-Based Workshop was how to add ECO codes to the headers of games in the Fritz12 interface. We're going to look at something a little bit different this week, but kind of similar, and right away people are scratching their heads. I'll show you rather than just tell you. First of all, we know how to open up a database. Either hit F12 or go to the application menu, go to open, select open database. Kicks you to your game list. You'll recognize this from last week. We had a small database of 12 games of the recent World Championship match that we were working with. What we have here across the top are, well, these are called keys. They're indexes, and they're based on, they're categorized by different parts of the game: end-game strategy, tactics, themes, and openings. Typically, you will not be able to use these things unless you either create them or use them from another database. Fritz will create an opening key for you. So, for example, I have 12 games here. If we click openings, we get this. Now, it gives you a bunch of different options. Select key allows you to pick an existing key, possibly from a different database. Install an empty key is not something you want to do in Fritz. Basically, if you want to build your own key using ChessBase, you would install an empty key. So forget those top two buttons. What you're going to look at here is you've got big key and small key. The difference between them is this. A big key is a huge, comprehensive opening key that has every ECO code in it. It has subvariations of all those ECO codes. There are literally hundreds or thousands of game classifications in the big key. Now, that's really good if you have a huge database of games. If you have a database that's got hundreds of thousands or millions of games, that's what you want to use. You want to use a big key. But for a small database like this, you've only got 12 games. I'll go back here and look. There's only 12 games in this database. It's overkill. You've only got 12 games. You don't need bazillions of opening keys. You don't need all 500 ECO codes and multiple subclassifications. All you need is a very small general key to get to the games that you want. So what you'll do here is click Install Small Key instead. Now, remember last week we talked about when you're burning the ECO codes into the headers of the games, how long it takes is going to be a function of how many games you're working with and how fast your computer is. Same deal with this. If you have a monster database of hundreds of thousands, millions of games, and you're going to install a big key, I can safely tell you that you're probably going to want to go away for a while and come back. Whereas if you have a very small database and you use the small key, bang, it's going to be done like almost instantly, and I'm going to demonstrate that right now. We have games here. We click the opening tab. We go to install small key. It's done that quick. This is what the small key looks like, by the way. I'll give you an idea how this works. You have verbal names of openings here. For example, Sicilian, if you move across to where these numbers are, what it does, it tells you how many games there are in that particular key. There's also 2 dots on some of these, not all of them. If there's 2 dots, it means there's sub-keys. And we'll use the Sicilian as an example, even though there are no games from the recent World Championship that were Sicilian defenses. This has 2 dots, it means there are some sub-keys, some further sub-classifications. So we'll double-click on it. And now we have a whole bunch of Sicilian variations listed. Alpin, Closed, Sveshnikov, Marazzi Bind. Notice that some of these, like the Dragon, there's a number, and there are 2 dots. That means there are further sub-keys under this key. So we double-click on it, and now we have the Rouser system. So, and we'll back up, Schwinigan, the carries attack. And the way you go back to a previous key, if you go up one level to go back to the next higher key, you see these 2 dots up here at the top with the black bar on them. Double-click on that. That takes you back to your previous key, your next higher level of classification. So if you go to the Najdorf, here you have a couple different keys, and check this out. There's even some sub-keys within the sub-key. Get down the poison pawn variation. Double-click the 2 dots to go up one level. Double-click again, and here we are back at our very first highest level of keys where we have names of all these different openings. Notice that we have Queen's Gambit, Slav, so there were some Queen's Gambits in this match. There were Slavs, there were Catalans, there were a couple of Nimzo Indians, there was a Grunfeld, and there was an English opening. This is really cool with small databases, especially of a particular match or a particular tournament, because you can look at a glance and see what kinds of openings were played. But if you want to get more specific, you want to find a specific game. For example, there were 3 games that were Slavs, so we'll double click on it. And now we have some further sub-variations. Semi-Slav, 0. Botvinnik, 0. We go the whole way down here. The main variation of the Slav, there were 3 games. If you double-click on that, there are 3 games. These were the 3 games of the World Championship that used the Slav variation. And look at the top here. We get the ECO code, we get a move order, and then just as reinforcement, there's the ECO code, and this time we have a verbal name of the opening that describes what this variation is. So we can double-click on a game, and there it is. It's loaded, ready to go. We can just play through it, and it even jumps you to the defining move of this opening. After white plays 5A4, that is the defining move that defines this as the main variation of the Slav. Pretty cool stuff, and it's easy to do, and you can do this on any database. You could, now let me go back to F12 here, hit F12 and go back, and we'll just hit the 2 dots to go back to the top. For a small, as I said, for a small database, this is an ideal key because you don't need tons and tons and tons and tons of opening keys. Look here, I mean, most of the stuff isn't even used. I mean, there was no Sicilians, there were no Pyrrhics, there were no French defenses. If you were to put in the big key, if you click that button, you would have bazillions of keys that would have no games in it. And the other thing is that the size of the keys, the file size that the program uses, would actually dwarf the size of your database. You would have these 2 files that contain the keys and the little pointers that say what games go with what keys would actually be enormous, many, many, many times more than the size of all the other files of your database, since there's only 12 games. So don't use big key unless you've got a really big database. How big is up to you. Personally, again, if it's fewer than 5 or 10,000 games, I would go with the small key. But if you want to go ahead and use big key, knock yourself out, but you're going to wind up eating up a bunch of hard drive space. So it's entirely up to you. Play around with it, and I'll give you one more little tip, and that is if you ever want to remove the opening key to a database, like say you decide to use the big key and you don't like it, you'd rather use the small one instead, here's the trick. You go up here to this button, and you may not get the pop-up. The software I'm using to make this video may not pick this up, but this is the name of the database, and when I go to it, there should be a mouse over pop-up that tells you the location: bases/analysis/worldchampionship2010.cbh. That's where my database is located. I can go to that folder in Windows Explorer or my computer and delete the CKO and CPO, that's P as in Paul, CPO file and CKO file for this database, and that will remove the opening keys. It'll just get rid of them totally, and I can just go back, and the next time I come into this database and I click the opening tab, I'll have those buttons again and I'll have those choices. So if you make a choice, you don't like it, you can always go back in, delete the files, and pick the other choice as well. So keep that in mind. That leaves you free to experiment a little bit to see what's going to work the best for you. Next week, we're going to have another chess-based workshop with more tips for you. Until then, please have fun.